And she told the child that she must never mention what had happened to anyone, and particularly not to Aban, as she was going to represent her sister and marry him, and that if she ever told anyone what she had seen, her life would be taken at once. She then made the little girl carry her load to Aban's house. Once upon a time, there lived a man called Aban. Aban had always admired a girl called Eme very much and wished to marry her. Eme was the finest girl among all the girls in her village. It was a custom in those days for the parents to demand such a large amount for their daughters as dowry, that if after they were married they failed to get on with their husband, as they could not redeem themselves, they were sold as slaves. Aban paid a very large sum of dowry for Eme, and she was put in the fatting house until the proper time arrived for her to marry. Aban told the parents that when their daughter was ready, they must send her over to him. This they promised to do. Eme's father was a rich man, and after 7 years had passed and it became time for her to go to her husband's house, he saw a very fine girl who had also just come out of the fatting house and whom the parents wished to sell as slave. Eme's father therefore bought her and gave her to his daughter as her handmaiden. The next day, Eme's little sister, being very anxious to go with her, obtained her mother's permission, and they started off together, with the slave girl carrying a large bundle containing clothes and presents from Eme's father. Aban's house was a long day's march from where they lived. When they arrived just outside the town, they came to a spring where the people used to get their drinking water, but no one was allowed to bathe there. Eme, however, knew nothing about this. They took off their clothes to wash close to the spring, and where there was a deep hole which led to the water juju's house. The slave girl knew of this juju and thought if she could get her mistress to bathe, she would be taken by the juju, and she would then be able to take her place and marry Aban. So they went down to bathe, and when they were close to the water, the slave girl pushed her mistress in, and she at once disappeared. The little girl then began to cry, but the slave girl said, "If you cry any more, I will take away your life at once and throw your body into the hole after your sister." And she told the child that she must never mention what had happened to anyone, particularly not to Aban, as she was going to represent her sister and marry him, and that if she ever told anyone what she had seen, her life would be taken away at once. She then made the little girl carry her load to Aban's house. When they arrived, Aban was very much disappointed at the slave girl's appearance, as she was not nearly as pretty as fine as he had expected her to be. But as he had not seen Eme for 7 years, he had no suspicion that the girl was not really Eme. He then called all his friends to play and feast. And when they arrived, they were very much surprised and said, "Is this the fine woman for whom you paid so much dowry, and whom you told us so much about?" And Aban could not answer them. The slave girl was then for some time very cruel to Eme's little sister, and wanted to eliminate her by all means, so that her position would be more secure with her husband. She beat the little girl every day and made her carry the largest water pot to the spring. She also made the child place her finger in the fire to use as firewood. When the time came for food, the slave girl went to the fire and got a burning piece of wood and burned the child all over the body with it. When Akpan asked her why she treated the child so badly, she replied that she was a slave that her father had bought for her. When the little girl took the heavy water pot to fill in the river, there was no one to lift it up for her. She therefore had to remain a long time at the spring, and at last began calling for her sister Eme to come and help her. When Eme heard her little sister crying for her, she begged the water juju to allow her go and help her sister. So he told her she might go, but that she must return to him again immediately. When the little girl saw her sister, she did not want to leave her. She asked to be allowed to go into the hole with her. She then told Eme how very badly she had been treated by the slave girl, and her elder sister told her to have patience and wait, that a day of vengeance would arrive sooner or later. The little girl went back to Akpan's house with a glad heart as she had seen her sister. But when she got to the house, the slave girl said, "Why have you been so long getting the water?" and then took another stick from the fire and burned the little girl very badly and starved her for the rest of the day. This went on for some time, until one day, when the child went to the river for water. After all the people had gone, she cried out for her sister as usual, but she did not come for a long time, as there was a hunter from Akpan's town hidden near, watching the hole, and the water juju told Eme that she must not go. But as the little girl went on crying bitterly, Eme at last persuaded the juju to let her go, promising to return quickly. When she emerged from the water, she looked very beautiful, with the rays of the setting sun shining on her body. She helped her little sister with her water pot and then disappeared into the hole again. The hunter was amazed at what he had seen, and when he returned, he told Akpan that a beautiful woman had come out of the water and helped the little sister with her water pot. He also told Akpan that he was convinced that the girl he had seen at the spring was his proper wife, and that the water juju must have taken her. Akpan then made up his mind to go out and watch and see what happened. So in the early morning, the hunter came for him, and they both went down to the river and hid in the forest near the water hole. When Akpan saw Eme come out of the water, he recognized her at once and went and considered how he would get her out of the power of the water juju. He was advised by some of his friends to go to an old woman who frequently made sacrifices to the water juju and consult her as to what was the best thing to do. When he went to her, she told him to bring one white slave, one white goat, one piece of cloth, one white chicken, and a basket of eggs. Then, when the great juju day arrived, she told him to take them to the water juju and make a sacrifice of them on his behalf. The day after the sacrifice was made, the water juju would return the girl to her, and she would bring her to Akpan. Akpan then bought the slave and took all the other things to the woman. And when the day of the sacrifice arrived, he went with his friend and the hunter and witnessed the old woman make the sacrifice. The slave was bound up and led to the hole. Then the old woman called to the water juju and cut the slave's throat with a sharp knife and pushed him into the hole. She then did the same to the goat and chicken, and also threw the eggs and clothes in on top of them. After this had been done, they all returned to their homes. The next morning, at dawn, the old woman went to the hole and found Eme standing at the side of the spring. So she told her that she was her friend and was going to take her to her husband. She took Eme to her own home and hid her in her room, and sent word to Aban to come to her house and to take great care that the slave woman knew nothing about the matter. So Aban left the house secretly by the back door and arrived at the old woman's house without meeting anybody. When Eme saw Aban, she asked for her little sister. So he sent his friend the hunter to go pick her little sister. And he met her carrying her water pot to get morning supply of water from the spring. And he brought her to the old woman's house with him. When Eme had embraced her sister, she told her to return to the house and do something to annoy the slave woman, and then she was to run as fast as she could back to the old woman's house, where no doubt the slave girl would follow her and would meet them all inside the house and see Eme, who she believed she had taken away her life. The little girl did as she was told. She confronted the slave woman in a very loud tone. She then ran as hard as she could to the old woman's house. Directly, the slave woman heard what the little girl said. She was quite angry and seized a burning stick from the fire and ran after the child. But the little one got to the house first and ran inside. The slave woman followed close upon her heels with the burning stick in her hand. Then Eme came out and confronted the slave woman. As she saw Eme, her mistress, whom she thought she had taken away her life, she stood quite still. Then they all went back to Apan's house, and when they arrived there, Apan asked the slave woman what she meant by pretending that she was Eme, and why she had tried to kill her. But seeing she was found out, the slave woman had nothing to say. Many people were then called out to play and celebrate the recovery of Apan's wife, and when they had all come, he told them what the slave woman had done. After this, Eme treated the slave girl in the same way as she had treated her little sister. She made her put her finger in the fire and burnt her with sticks. She also made her beat fufu with her head, and after a time she was tied up to a tree where she starved until she gave up. Ever since that time, when a man marries a girl, he is always present when she comes out of the fatting house and takes her home himself, so that such evil things as happened to Eme and her sister may not occur again.